All right. As Taylor said a minute ago, welcome. We're all very excited to have you join us today for new lead agency onboarding. This is the first of 2 sessions that we'll have focused on this. Our session today will focus on some of the community network administrative functions and class observations and accountability. And session 2 will focus on coordinated enrollment and state funding. Both of these are designed for new lead agencies and anyone in a lead agency who would like to attend. We can go to the next slide. So as I said, we're excited to welcome you all here today. I am Amy Poirier, and I am joined with my colleagues, by my colleagues Taylor Dunn and Amanda Colin. And we'll be working together to facilitate and present this content with you today. One thing, as many of you already know, is I am newer to my role with the department. So if you don't mind taking a moment and going into the participants area of Zoom and going to your name and adding your network next to your name, that would be beneficial to me as I get to know you. As I've taken on this role, and especially since so many of us here are new to a lead agency role. So that can be done by going to the participants section in Zoom, and if you highlight over your name and click right click, it will allow you to give you 2 options, mute and more. And if you hit more, you can rename yourself. And if you look on mine, you'll see I've added LDOE to mine as well. So as you're taking a minute to do that, I'm going to go ahead and start with our agenda today. As I said previously, we know we're joined by new lead agencies, but I know we also have on the webinar individuals who are in existing lead agencies, but maybe new in their role within a lead agency, and also existing lead agency individuals who have decided to join us for a refresher or to hear this information again today. So during this session, as I mentioned before, we'll go over the 3 key responsibilities required by lead agencies and focus on assurances and responsibilities related to your work with the community network, your administrative role within the community network, and class observations and accountability. It'll be in session 2, where we focus on coordinated enrollment. And just a note to help you as we navigate through these slides, you will see some slides that are marked with a navy circle icon with an I in it. These slides contain additional information that will align with the assurances and responsibilities that we're presenting today. And you can go back and refer to this information after the presentation to help you in your lead agency role. You will also be receiving an onboarding handout that will provide you with additional strategies that align with what we're talking about today. All right, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Okay, so I'll jump in, and this is Taylor Dunn. I'm the Director of Early Childhood Access and Accountability at the department on the early childhood team. So before I pass it back over to Amy to walk you through much of this deck today, I'm going to talk through the early childhood vision that we have in Louisiana. So much of this is likely familiar to you all. This is probably not the first time you've been exposed to this content, but we just wanted to ground you in the vision for this work and really the reason that we all do this work, to ensure that you have this context. So I want to start with kind of walking through what the challenge was in Louisiana around the early childhood world prior to 2012. So as I'm sure most of you know, in 2012, a set of sweeping reforms was enacted, which we call Act 3. And prior to that, and the reason that reforms were made was because there was a pretty serious challenge in the state. So for the most part, the challenge was that the programs, the early childhood programs, were fragmented and siloed. And as a result of that, there was no coordination across a community over the multiple programs serving young children. There was inefficient use of limited funding. So we all know that early childhood funding is limited. And because of this lack of coordination, there were inefficiencies in how the funding was used. There was no unified measure of quality across the different early childhood program types. So as a result, there was no way to meaningfully compare the quality of a pre-K program at a school with a Head Start or with a child care center. There was limited supports or information for families who were navigating a complex system to enroll their children. And most importantly, children were not showing up to kindergarten classrooms ready and on track for success. So as a result of that challenge, Act 3 was passed in 2012. As I mentioned, Act 3 is a set of multiple reforms to the early childhood system that was really designed to unify state systems and to strengthen the coordination of early childhood work at the local level. And to date, there have been several big accomplishments that we as a state have made following the passage of Act 3. Sorry about that, y'all. So I'm just gonna walk through a few of the main achievements that we as a state have had. So first, we've unified all of the state level early childhood programs under one governing agency, which is the Department of Education, which means that the Department of Education is responsible for overseeing childcare, including childcare licensing and childcare assistance program. The Head Start Collaboration Office also is situated at the Department of Education, and school-based pre-K is housed in the Department of Education. Second, we've established a community network in every community in the state. And as you all know, these community networks are headed up at the local level by a lead agency that functions as a fiscal agent and a coordinator and administrator of this work. Third, we've implemented a statewide unified quality rating system such that every publicly funded early childhood program in the state, including childcare, Head Start, and pre-K, participates in the same rating system and receives a performance profile that's published on louisianaschools.com. And last, we've aligned quality improvement supports to that unified quality rating system. So all of the work to support and drive improvement in classroom quality is aligned to the results from that unified quality rating system. This is the vision for early childhood in Louisiana. So the overarching vision is that all children in Louisiana have the experiences they need in their early childhood years such that they enter kindergarten ready to learn. In order to reach this goal, we know that these things need to be true about birth to 5-year-old classrooms. First, that these classrooms respond to children's emotions with sensitivity and warmth. Second, that these classrooms are organized to manage children's attention, time, and behavior. Third, that these classrooms promote children's learning through engaging language and interactions. And last, that these classrooms support children's development with high quality instructional tools. Here's a rough timeline of the progression of this work and the implementation of Act 3. So this work really began, the community network work began in 2013, 2014, when 13 communities across the state launched as community network pilots. The following year in 2014, 2015, there were 16 additional community networks added. In 2015, 2016, all communities in the state had a community network, and that was the learning year for the unified quality rating system that we now use. In 2016, 2017, publicly funded sites were issued practice performance profiles based on that learning year. And supports, funding, and tax credits were aligned to the unified quality rating system. In 2017, 2018, the first official performance profiles were released for sites based on the 2016, 2017 observations. And we also in that year started our infant class pilot. In 2018, 2019, policy was changed to mandate site improvement planning for low performing sites. So now any site scoring below 3.75 on the Unified Quality Rating System is required to participate in a mandatory year-long site improvement planning process. In 2019, 2020, the year that just wrapped up, every infant classroom in the state was observed using class for a learning year. And beginning in 2020, 2021, all infant classrooms in the state at publicly funded centers will be fully incorporated into the Unified Quality Rating System. They will be observed just like toddler and pre-K classrooms, and those scores will contribute to sites' performance profiles. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Amy, who's going to walk us through community networks and the first set of responsibilities that you all as lead agencies have.
All right, thanks so much, Taylor. So as Taylor said, we're just going to talk a bit about community networks. Most of this we understand that you have a full concept of already, and some of which Taylor has just spoke about. So this all starts with the establishment of community networks and related responsibilities in 2015. And as you all know, each community network includes a lead agency and includes all publicly funded early childhood programs. Primary activities of each of these community networks is to report the number of children who are enrolled across all publicly funded programs through the October 1 and February 1 child count, to conduct class observations of all classrooms with children birth through 5, coordinate enrollment processes for families, and request state funding based on family demand. Next slide. Right now, we're going to look at your role as a lead agency within the community network. As most of you know, or all of you know, a lead agency has been selected or designated by the department for each community network, and the purpose of that lead agency is to unify childcare, Head Start, and publicly funded pre-K in both public and non-public schools. So the 3 big lead agency responsibilities are within conducting administrative functions for the community network, including serving as a fiscal agent, which we'll discuss today. Also coordinating accurate class observations for all infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms, in addition to providing feedback to all programs, which we'll also discuss today. And then the last thing is coordinated birth to 5 child count, enrollment, and state funding applications, which will be the focus of our second session. Lead agencies' roles are designated for a 2-year period, which began on July 1st, and funding cycles are annual. Year 1 is 2020, 2021, and year 2 is 2021 to 2022. Next slide, please. So now we'll delve a bit into community network administration. And we'll start with an overview and then go into each of these responsibilities more in depth in the subsequent slide. Early childhood lead agencies are required to conduct the administrative functions, as we talked about, and serve as the fiscal agent. As part of this responsibility, lead agencies should be ensuring that all required program partners and any additional partners interested in supporting early care and education are actively engaged in network activities. In addition to serving as a fiscal agent, they are also responsible for maintaining records for their community network and responsible for developing a central point of contact. And the purpose of this is to streamline communication for their program partners and ensure that the dissemination of departmental information in ways that are both timely and efficient. All right, next slide. All right, so we'll go into the first assurance. So this speaks to the assurance of engaging the required program partners. Required program partners include any school district in the community network's geographic boundaries and all early childhood programs within these districts. And if applicable, a recovery school district if more than 10% of public schools are governed by a recovery school district. Additional program partners include any programs that feed into the participating school district's pre-K and kindergarten programs. And this includes Head Start, Early Head Start, school-based programs, charter schools, the non-public school early childhood development program, or NSECD, early steps, and type 3 child care providers. And as most of you know, type 3 child care providers are required to participate in both accountability and enrollment activities as part of the community network. And here again, we'll mention the additional partners in the community who want to support early care and education. Next slide, please. In addition to this, we've talked about a lot, the responsibility of serving as a fiscal agent. So you have seen these assurances before in your RFA, but once again, lead agencies are responsible to serve as a fiscal agent and to maintain records and documentation for the network, and also make these records available to representatives of the department when requested. All right. These next few slides, or these next series of about 4 slides, are these informational slides that I mentioned earlier with the icon. So we do encourage you to revisit these slides later in the slide deck. They provide you with additional information about funding and budgeting. So as you all know, lead agencies are allocated funding from BESI on an annual basis. The funding period is July 1 through June 30th. And it's based on the number of classrooms, infant, toddler, and pre-K. Okay. Specific expenditures related to community network administration, class observations, and coordinated enrollment are part of what the funding is allocated for. And funding sources include the State General Fund and Child Care Development Fund. Now, there are some funding restrictions that you should be aware of. The funding cannot be used to increase seats in programs, for construction or facility remodeling, or for such expenses as furniture, food, or refreshments. Funds unexpended at the end of the fiscal year will also revert back to the state. And I'll pause for a second to see if there are any comments in the chat, as we've gone over quite a bit.
No, we're good, Amy. No comments right now.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and move on. So one thing here, and this is another informational slide, is that the department has established recommendations for the use of lead agency funds, and this is outlined here in the table for your reference. These recommendations are based on the estimated costs associated with each function. And as you can see here, class observations have a 70% estimated amount of funding, coordinated enrollment, 15%, network administration, 10%, and materials and supplies, 5%. And it's important to note that amounts budgeted for supplies that exceed the recommendation may not be approved without clear and compelling justification. All right, next slide. This slide contains some information about the EGMS platform. The Louisiana Department of Education manages grants using a web-based management system called EGMS, or the Electronic Grants Management System. And this provides public access to allocation and expenditure data and federal grant programs. So one of the responsibilities you have as a new lead agency will be to access your budget application and complete the LEA central data requirements located on the Access and Select screen. First, you're going to want to update your early childhood contact information, and that's located on the Competitive Program Contacts tab, and save the new information. You'll want to do this even if no edits are made to the information within the system. You'll also want to agree to common fiscal assurances. and this is located on the Common Assurances tab. New users should contact Lindsay Bradford at la.gov to ensure appropriate access is granted or if you have any questions. Next slide. We're also providing for you on one of the informational slides here, the budget coding guides. These are regular coding guidelines that you'll use, and as well as a list of codes that are frequently used. These are located in the Louisiana Accounting Uniform Guidelines Handbook, or the LAF guide. And this serves as a tool for program cost accounting at the local and state levels. This is quite a lengthy document, so we have taken the time to provide the most common codes here for your use and for you to refer to in the future. Next slide. All right. Before we move into the assurances and responsibilities related to communication, I'll pause again to see if there are any questions about the fiscal responsibilities.
And y'all should feel free to take yourselves off mute if you have questions, but if you would rather just type questions or comments into the chat box, we can see them there as well.
All right, I don't see any. I'm going to move on. If I see something, we can pause. So these assurances and responsibilities are still within your network administration realm, but they have to do with developing that centralized point of contact that I talked about earlier that is really used to streamline communication for your program partners. As part of this assurance, lead agencies will designate an individual to serve as their primary point of contact between the network and the department. Agencies will also need to send a representative to all department-sponsored meetings for lead agencies. Lead agencies will also need to disseminate communication with program partners when requested by the department. And the last thing here is to conduct meetings for all community network program partners. And it says a minimum of once each quarter, but a note here is that best practice is to conduct these meetings once a month. There are other ways to facilitate communication within your network, including newsletters, emails, follow-ups, and things as this, but the primary idea here is to streamline communication with your partners. Next slide. This is another one of our information slides. Not only are you responsible for streamlining communication with your partners, we are also here to support you, and there are other ways that we share information at the department with you. Support from the early childhood team includes early childhood collaboratives and roundtables. These are opportunities for in-person or virtual trainings, which include high quality resources and tools, and help for lead agencies as they are trying to achieve their results for children birth through 5. There is also an early childhood newsletters, which I imagine most of you get. This newsletter provides current events and updates for licensing, criminal background checks, child care providers, lead agencies, and other departmental information. We also have an office hours weekly webinar. We strongly encourage you to attend that. That is every Tuesday. And this allows you to have time to collaborate with other colleagues, learn new ideas, get department updates, and get questions answered about lead agency responsibilities. There are also 2 early childhood email inboxes where you can reach out to get support and have your questions answered. And they are here. It's lead agency support at la.gov and early childhood at la.gov. And then in the slide deck, there is also a link to the early childhood team directory, which has the email and contact information of various people that you will work with at the department in your role as a lead agency. All right, I'm going to now pass it over to Taylor, and she's going to take time to share with you the assurances and responsibilities related to your class observations and accountability.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Before I jump in, I do see that there's one comment in the chat box. I'm not receiving the newsletters from Kayla Parker. Carla, sorry. What
okay.
network are you representing?
I'm at the Children's Coalition, and when I go in to submit my information, it gives me an error box, and it says that I guess the page, it's a page error. I guess the link is broken, and I cannot put my information into the box.
Okay.
So,
great to know. Thank you so much. We're going to figure that out for you.
would you like me to give you my email address?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Could you type that into the chat box?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, I see you unmuted yourself. Do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I was going to tell you that, Carla, that particular link, I think that they're working on it, but I was going to say that to subscribe to the newsletter, there is a particular web email. We just put it in at the end of the session. I think it's LDOE communications, and Amy and I just put it in at the last slide. But I'm going to send you an email right now to give you the directions on subscribing to it, so you can do that real quick. But yeah,
Perfect. Thank you very much.
sure, no problem.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Carla, for letting us know. All right, y'all. I'm going to talk through some of the responsibilities that you all have as lead agencies to conduct class observations and to support the early childhood accountability system. So here are some of the assurances that you agree to when you become a lead agency around class and accountability. So one of the big things that you all have to do is you have to maintain a cadre, is what the assurances say, of class reliable observers. You have to build that capacity at the local level of folks in your community, whether they be embedded in sites. So it could be, site level coordinators or administrators, or they could be employees of your organization, or they could be contracted individuals who are reliable in the class tools and who can carry out these class observations. All classrooms are required to be observed by observers at the local level twice annually, once in the fall and once in the spring. And then there is a handful of things you have to do and steps you have to take to ensure that this class data is entered correctly and accurately, that your observers maintain a level of reliability, and that you carry out other processes to support data collection and reporting for the accountability system. So we'll go into more details about what that looks like in practice. So first, I do want to talk a little bit about the local role and the importance of the local role in the class observation system. So as I'm sure you all know, the Early Childhood Unified Quality Rating System, or accountability system, relies on a combination of both local and third-party observers to conduct these class observations each year. The local observers who are embedded in the communities and many times embedded in sites become these folks at the local level who can walk and talk and speak the class language, who can support classroom teachers to improve their practice. So it's really critical that these folks who are local observers understand class, understand the value of high quality interactions, and can support classrooms in your community as they conduct these observations and provide feedback. So just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what this looks like on a typical year, so going back to 2018, 2019, prior to COVID, there were more than 15,000 class observations conducted across the state in roughly 1,600 sites across about 5,500 classrooms. All said and done, that amounts to more than 1 million minutes of care and education observed, which is just staggering. And there are approximately 1,300 certified local class observers who conduct these observations in communities. And I just want to emphasize that that means there are 1,300 folks across the state who are equipped to provide support to teachers, to understand what high quality early childhood looks like. And we think that is just really a wonderful part of this system, the reliance on local observers. It's critical. I also want to note that every site receives third-party observations to check these local observations. So they function as a check on the reliability of these local observations that are conducted. So at least 50% of classrooms in each site will be observed by third party, and it's typically closer to about 70% of classrooms across the state will be observed at least once by third party. And of course, why do we do these class observations? What comes of it? We publish performance profiles for every publicly funded early childhood program in the state. So again, I know I've already mentioned this, but this includes public and non-public pre-K programs, subsidized childcare programs, and Head Start and Early Head Start programs. All of these sites are required to participate in the Unified Quality Rating System, and they receive a performance profile on louisianaschools.com. This makes Louisiana extremely unique. We are one of rare sites or states across the country that have a mandatory statewide unified quality rating system. And so, this is a point of pride for a lot of lead agencies that they are participating in this system and supporting this accountability system. The performance profiles that are published on School and Center Finder at louisianaschools.com contain two key components. First is a performance rating, which is based solely on class observations. And second is a set of informational metrics that we report on sites' use of best practices. So these things include the use of a Tier 1 curriculum, how much they're assessing the publicly funded children at their site using TS Gold, and then also the credentials for teachers at the sites. I just want to emphasize here in this blue box on the right that our unified quality rating system has been validated by researchers at the University of Virginia. So researchers from UVA have come into Louisiana. They have conducted external outside observations, and they have validated our unified quality rating system and have found that children who are in classrooms that are rated highly on our rating system have higher outcomes, have better outcomes than children who are in low quality classrooms. So they've found that it's correlated to child outcomes, which is really exciting. This is what the Louisiana School and Center Finder looks like. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this, whether you're new to early childhood or not. We're very excited that early childhood is a part of School and Center Finder. What this means is that this is a one-stop shop for families who are interested in learning about different programs in schools for their children. So they can go to this website to look up elementary and middle and high schools, but they can also look up childcare centers in their area or Head Start programs in their area as well. This is what the early childhood profile looks like for an example site. So if you were to search for a site on School Finder and navigate to the academic performance tab, you would see something that looks like this. So here at the top where it says what is the site's rating, this site was high proficient. So sites are rated either unsatisfactory, approaching proficient, proficient, high proficient, or excellent. And then it goes into details about how that rating was measured. And so it actually provides the score out of 7 and shows the breakdown of those score ranges for each of the rating categories. I want to share a little bit about our statewide improvement on our early childhood quality rating system over the course of the last few years. We have seen really impressive and steady incremental improvement over the course of the years that we've implemented the unified quality rating system. So this data that you're looking at here shows 2016, 2017, all the way to 2018, 2019. And what you can see is that each year there's been a decrease in the percent of sites that are scoring unsatisfactory or approaching proficient, and an increase in the percent of sites that are scoring high proficient or excellent. Similarly, if we look at the data at the domain level, so looking at the domains of the class tools over the course of time, we see that there has been improvement in the average domain score on each domain within both the pre-K and toddler class tools. And really where we're seeing the greatest gains is in the toddler domains, which is really exciting. And specifically where we've seen the most dramatic gains is in the engaged support for learning domain, which is the instructionally focused toddler domain. Of course, you'll also notice that that was the lowest scoring domain in 2016, 2017. So there was the most opportunity for growth there, but we're really excited that we've seen that steady and incremental growth each year in that domain and others. And then last, this improvement is not solely in schools or Head Starts or childcare. We see this improvement across all of the program types that we work with. So you can see the overall score has improved each year, and the average score for schools, Head Starts, and childcare has also improved each year. And again, where we're seeing the greatest gains is in childcare. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about some other assurances that are embedded in your role as part of carrying out the accountability system. So I'll go through some of these. Lead agencies will maintain an adequate number of local reliable observers and maintain a copy of their certificate of reliability. You all will ensure that all local observers have the required criminal background check to enter child care centers. You all will collaborate with program partners to establish and implement written procedures that minimize potential conflict of interest between local observers and the personnel at sites. You all will also develop a schedule and a written local protocol for carrying out class observations in infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms each fall and each spring. And you will establish and implement a written process and timeline to ensure that written results and feedback from every one of these local observations is reported to the site within 10 business days. This is really critical because our unified quality rating system is not just a system that produces a rating. It is a system that truly drives improvement, and sites and teachers and classrooms rely on this feedback that they receive from local observations to inform coaching, professional development, training, etc. It really drives improvements in real time, and you all get to be a critical part of that work. I know I've covered a lot of ground, so before I jump into more details about observation protocols and other components of this work, I'm going to pause and make sure there aren't any questions. Does anyone want to take themselves off mute and ask a question or type one into the chat box? Okay, hearing none, I will assume I can continue, but please do not hesitate to jump in if you have a question. Feel free to take yourself off mute or enter it into the chat box and I can pause. So a part of your work as a lead agency in conducting class observations is that you are required to create a local protocol for conducting these class observations. We, as the Department of Education, release guidance and resources each year so that you can develop these protocols. We do not expect you to develop these protocols from scratch. We provide a ton of guidance about what should go into these protocols, but there is room for you to develop locally specific rules around what this protocol should look like, because we do know that every context is slightly different. So we want to give you the opportunity to make a protocol that works for you all and your observers. Okay, some other assurances related to class include that lead agencies will develop and implement a written process to monitor and compare the results of local observers for the purpose of ensuring accurate observations. So in addition to you overseeing that these observations happen, it's incumbent on you all to an extent, and we do this level of analysis as well, but it's incumbent on you all to think about the reliability of your observers, to look at trends, to ensure that the trends in the data do not suggest that observers are scoring unreliably. And that is something that we can support you to do, but that's a critical part of your work as a lead agency. To support the reliability of observers, you are required to conduct a minimum of 1 calibration activity each semester. So that looks like you giving your observers an opportunity to view a video of a classroom using the class tool and then calibrate on the scores. And this is really critical just to make sure that their reliability is kept active and that they're getting feedback on what is a reliable way of coding on the class tools. You're required to ensure that every local observer in your network is shadow scored at least 1 time during the course of the year. You also are required to conduct shadow score observations, generally speaking, for 10% of all observations during the fall and spring observation windows. And then you're also required to conduct at least 1 shadow score observation for each age configuration in the network. So if your network has infant, toddler, and pre-K classrooms, you should shadow score at least 1 infant, toddler, and pre-K observation. And shadow scoring, for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, that is when 2 observers go into the classroom and observe, and then they compare notes and scores, and they reconcile those scores and notes at the end. And that really just helps ensure the reliability of these local observations. Any questions about any of that? We do have some resources available on our website and in the class portal to support the reliability of class observations conducted at the local level. So there's a couple things I want to draw your attention to. One, there's a class video library, and there's a link here that you can access later once we send the slides. And this class video library on our website contains little vignette videos. So they're short, they're brief little videos of high quality interactions happening that have been coded as high quality for particular dimensions of the toddler and pre-K class tools. So for example, if you have a teacher who is really struggling with one particular dimension, you can go to this website link and you can pull up some example videos of what that dimension looks like when it's high quality. So that can be a really helpful source of videos for you to do in network meetings or trainings or anything that you're engaged in with your folks in your network. Right now, infant classrooms are not a part of this class video library, but we have contracted with ULL PCARD to create infant classroom videos. So we hope those will be available soon, hopefully before the end of 2020. And also we have class calibration videos. So the class video library on our website is very short videos, but on the class portal, we have created a handful of calibration videos. So those are 15 to 20 minute long videos that have coding justifications so that you can use these as calibration activities with your observers. Now there are only 4 for toddler and pre-K, so you should not be using the same ones over and over again, but these are some free sources of calibration videos that you can use. Okay, some more assurances include lead agencies ensure that all local observations entered into the class portal are conducted in accordance with the standardized procedures, ensure that observation information results are entered into the class portal accurately in accordance with timelines laid out in Bulletin 140, that you request corrections for observation data that's entered incorrectly. So if you or an observer in your community network submits an observation to the class portal incorrectly, they make an error, that's completely fine. We are all human. We do not expect you to be perfect data entry people, not every day at least. So you can submit an error correction to the department and we'll work with you to correct the data that may have been entered incorrectly. And then also it is required that you collect the scoring booklets for observations that are conducted in your network and that you keep those on file for 3 years. So this is really critical. If there's not already some sort of system in your network for collecting these and storing them in a way that makes them accessible, it's really critical that you set that up. This protects you and the accountability system in general. If in a year from now a site wants to appeal their performance profile or a particular observation, you having those scoring booklets will be really critical so that we can refer back to those if needed. And here's just some information on error corrections and appeals. So like I already mentioned, if you need to submit an error correction for any observation that was entered incorrectly, there's a form. It's an extremely easy process, but we do require documentation of the change. So you complete a form and you submit it. That form has information for how to submit the form as well. And then also there are circumstances where observations are appealed, both at the local and third-party level. So if an observation is conducted and the director or teacher or principal finds that the observation broke protocol or did not capture a typical experience in that classroom, they can submit an appeal. And the department makes these final appeal decisions each year in July and then communicates out. We typically only handle appeals for third-party observations. If you all get appeals for local observations, you can send them to us if you want us to mediate, but you can also, and you're encouraged to run your own appeal process at the local level. So if a contracted observer goes into a center and conducts an observation and that center feels like protocol was violated, they should be able to appeal that to you all, and you all should have a system in place for making those decisions. And you would just have to let us know the decision that you made. So when possible, we really like you all to handle your own local appeals. We handle third-party appeals, but we're happy to step in and get involved for a local appeal if it's helpful to you. I see that there's a question in the chat box about shadow scoring. So yes, it's a little tricky. I'm going to restate what you have to do for shadow scoring. So each semester you have to shadow score 10% of your classrooms. In addition to that, every observer in your network has to be shadow scored once annually. So if you have 2 observers and together they're conducting 20 observations, 10% of those observations need to be shadow scored each semester, and you could achieve that while also achieving the rule that each observer be shadow scored. So you could shadow score 1 observation from each observer, and then you should hit both 10% each semester and hit the requirement that you observe each, or shadow score each observer. There's also a requirement that you shadow score an observation for each age group, but typically we don't see that as a big challenge. Since there's just 3 age groups, it's pretty easy for communities to achieve that shadow scoring requirement. And we're always happy, Jill, if you want to get on the phone and talk about what that actually looks like or how many you actually have to observe to meet those requirements, we're happy to brainstorm with you. So I know we're short on time, but I think we're nearing the end here. So I'll try to go quickly. Oops, where did I go? So I just want to make sure that you're aware of the class portal. And if you don't already have access, you should be given access before the beginning of the school year. But this is the web portal that we use to input class data. So your observers should log in here. They should upload data from their class observations that are conducted. This is what the website looks like. And then there's a ton of guidance and resources and recorded webinars to support your use of the class portal. We are not going to go into that during this webinar, but there's a ton of information online so that if you're new to the class portal, you can print this out or watch some YouTube links and really understand how it works. Also, if you have any questions, the person to email is Sydney Anderson at la.gov. She's also just wonderful, and you could call her and she could walk you through using the class portal. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to assist and help you understand how all of these various things work. Okay, a few more assurances to go through before we wrap up today. Lead agencies are required to ensure that all sites in the network have a site code assigned by the department. This is really just a check on us. We assign site codes, but you should really have an understanding of what sites are in the network, what sites are in the class portal, and make sure that sites that are required to participate in the quality rating system are being observed, that the classrooms are set up correctly in the class portal, etc. We will also do that work, but that is in partnership with you all. Also, it is part of your responsibility to support the use of GOLD. So GOLD is a child assessment tool. Sites are asked to use GOLD to assess the publicly funded children in their classrooms. And you all as lead agencies should be able to support those sites to do that work. Understand GOLD, be trained in GOLD, and be able to answer questions at the local level. Of course, you're required to enter all observations into the class portal. And this is really about data certification, and you're about to get a jump start in data certification next week when we start data certification for the year. But you're also required to verify community network data and ensure that the data that we report on performance profiles is accurate. So here are some resources for GOLD. Here's some information just overall on how we as a state use GOLD. Here's a link to a document that ties Tier 1 curriculum to GOLD, which might be helpful. And then if you have any questions about using GOLD or best practices around GOLD or supporting teachers to use GOLD, you can reach out to Meredith Eckerd at la.gov and she'll help you out. And then I would just emphasize that there are 3 checkpoints for GOLD. So there's an October 31st checkpoint, February 28th, and May 31st. And no guidance has yet been issued on what this will look like for the coming year, given COVID-19. We'll keep you guys in the loop there, hope to have an answer pretty soon. But on a typical year, teachers are asked to submit assessment information at each of these 3 checkpoints during the course of the year. The percent of children assessed among the publicly funded kids is reported on sites' performance profiles. So although these checkpoints are not technically required, the results from how many and what percentage of children are assessed is reported on performance profiles. So sites by and large want to see a 3-star rating for their assessment rating and tend to use GOLD pretty regularly. So the extent to which you can support sites to do that will be really helpful. And then of course, we ask you to participate in a data certification process. Without going too into it, basically what this means is over the course of the school year, sites and teachers report to us informational metrics such as the number of children assessed in gold, the type of curriculum that's used in each classroom, the degree earned for the lead teacher in each classroom, and the certification for the lead teacher in each classroom. And because that information is manually reported and self-reported by sites, we ask you to certify that data and to verify that it's correct. So what data certification looks like is you working with sites to ensure that what they've reported is correct and accurate as possible. It's a pretty easy process. The biggest lift will be communicating with sites and making sure that they can verify the data. And then generally, this is what it typically looks like. We work with you in spring to make sure that the data that is reported is as accurate as possible. And then in summer, we will begin the actual data certification process. So we'll give you the files, you will verify them, work with sites to make changes, and then you will submit any necessary changes in a data review system that we call LDR. And then those changes are reflected before we release performance profiles. Here is just a breakdown of the class score range and the performance ratings and the star ratings for tax credits and bonus payments in case this is new to you. And I believe that's all. So, so we just wanted to wrap up and say that there are some upcoming opportunities and things that you should be aware of. So we're gonna be doing a second session like this, but instead of what we've covered today, we'll be focusing on coordinated enrollment and state funding and fiscal management, which are two critical components of your work that we just weren't able to cover in this first webinar. So we're hoping to host that on July 17th from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. If you're not able to join, please email Amy Poirier and let her know. Before we go back to school in August, we typically release a set of resources, materials, do a webinar, emails, etc., to support you guys to go back to school and begin the work of the lead agency for the year. So we will do that again this year. It will likely look slightly different this year because of COVID-19 and how many particularities there are. So we'll continue to communicate with you regularly about that. And then of course, we have weekly office hours for lead agencies every Tuesday at 3 p.m. These are really helpful. We know that you all are super busy, but to the extent you can, you should plan on joining these. It's an opportunity for you to hear from your peers. It's an opportunity for you to ask questions. We always do updates there and upcoming deadlines and announcements. So please plan on joining those as frequently as you can. And then every other week on Thursdays, the newsletter goes out. And as Amanda said, if you're not already subscribed, you can email ldoecommunications@la.gov and they can sign you up for the newsletter. And then for any ongoing questions or support, or if you have questions but you don't know who to ask, you can email Amy Poirier and she will make sure your questions get answered. So I know we're right at 3. Amy, is there anything I missed that you want to make sure you touch on before we wrap up today?
No, Taylor, I don't think so. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming, and I look forward to getting to know each of you and learning together on your first onboarding year.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Amy. Any other questions or concerns or things that we didn't cover that you hoped we were gonna cover today? Okay, Well, we're so glad that you were able to join us today. We wish we could get together for an in-person meeting, but of course that's not feasible right now. We hope you all are staying safe and healthy, and we'll be here if you have any questions. Thank you all so much.